I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we'll proceed on to item number 3 on the agenda, and that is public comment. We did not have anybody address the chair or the clerk on public comment, so we'll move on to item number 4, approval of the minutes of the December 14th, 2023 Executive Committee meeting. And what is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Mask. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Robinson. Any discussion on the motion to approve the December 14th meeting minutes that were in your packet? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on. If there's no objection, I would like to take item number 6A2 out of order. So is there any objection to item 6A being taken out of order? Okay, 6A2 is the endorsement on Monk Garden Visitor Center. And I will turn it over to Administrator Leonard, who had received an email, and I thought that it was important to have the executive committee weigh in on what the request was. So Administrator Leonard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as Chair Gibbs referenced, I did earlier this week, in fact, receive an email from the Executive Director of Botanical Gardens requesting that Marathon County specifically consider sending a letter, and it was addressed to me, the email, sending a letter endorsing their application for a non-state agency grant application that they're putting into the Department of Administration to assist in the financing relative to the expansion plans that Monk, that Monk Botanical Gardens has, that are summarized in the attachments that are within the packet. So as Chair Gibbs referenced, I reached out to him to ask for guidance on how to have that considered. I'd be happy to draft that letter if the executive committee provides me that direction to do so. Again, the request is for the this non-state agency grant application program to fund a portion of that expansion plan. There's not been a request. I don't infer from the communication that there is a request for the county at this time to provide funding. So it's really a letter of support for that grant application. I've been advised by the executive director of Monk Botanical Gardens that several other individuals within the community have to author such letters, and that's why I brought it to Chair Gibbs. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I'd open it up for questions and discussion and direction. Thoughts? Vice Chair McEwen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any information on this? I mean, to be interested as to find what they plan on doing as far as the facility?
Sure. So as I understand it, within your packet, you should have some information relative to the phases for their expansion plan. I don't have a copy of their proposed grant application, but my understanding is that it is funding the next phase in that expansion program. And according to the director of Monk Botanical Gardens, some of the achievements that they've had relative to their expansion over the last several years. Since 2017, when the executive director took her position, she was the only one employee of Monk Botanical Gardens. Since that time, they've expanded significantly to having 8 full-time employees and 5 part-time staff. Last year, in fact, she reported to me that they had 64,000 visitors to the Monk Botanical Gardens, which she indicates equates to approximately $4.2 million going back into the local economy. So I hope that answers your questions, but the last several pages of your packet were informational documents that were included, in the email correspondence from that executive director, Darcy Howard.
They should be on packet pages 17 through page 20 in the packet, all of the information that was provided and recirculated by the clerk in the packet.
Thank you. I did not see it at the end at first, so thank you.
Supervisor Robinson, please.
I would move that we support the project and direct the appropriate county staff to write letters communicating our support.
Supervisor Mass with a second. Any further discussion?
This is Supervisor Dickinson.
Supervisor Dickinson, please.
Have we done this in the past for other organizations that we know of?
I invite Administrator Leonard.
I can't recall off the top of my head whether we have any specific letters of support for grant applications, but certainly we have applied for grants relative to we were the lead grant applicant for the Dream Up local program relative to childcare shortage examination, and with respect to broadband expansion. I don't know if Supervisor Robinson has any specific examples of those grants that we likewise supported, but those are two occasions in which I know we have authored letters in support of grant applications.
I think
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
Yeah, I just had a couple other thoughts. What is the benefit to us to endorse it? And second, what is this non-state agency grant application? So they have a grant application to some private organization for funding? Thank you.
Sure. I'll start with the second part of your question first. The non-state agency grant application is actually a grant that is through the state of Wisconsin. It's administered through the Department of Administration. So it's an avenue for non-state agencies to apply to the state for grant funding for various projects. The first part of your question, which is what is the benefit to the county? I think if you're asking my perspective, and certainly this is just my perspective, not attempting to indicate that this is a reason for the board to do so, but the board does obtain some form of financing through sales tax, of course. We, in excess of $16 million this last year of sales tax revenue. I think it's reasonable to assume that a number of the individuals that are coming to visit the Monk Gardens are engaging in activity that would bring in sales tax revenue to the county. We don't partner directly with Monk Gardens in any other direct sense that I'm aware of. We have certainly utilized that facility. In fact, I held a department head meeting at that facility earlier in 2023. But I hope that answers your question. I don't know if there are other direct questions relative to benefits, but certainly the sales tax is one that I would categorize as a tangential benefit to Marathon County in terms of direct revenue.
Supervisor Robinson?
I think if you look at Monk Garden, it's named after Robert Monk, who was a realtor and who had a vision of trying to bring the gardens to the community, and it has fulfilled a role of increasing the understanding of nature and plants. It provides educational opportunities with preschool and looking at expanding opportunities. It is a neighborhood resource, a community resource that brings people into it. And the beauty of it from the perspective of the county board is that we are committing words versus dollars in our support of it. And I think that it's a valuable asset that improves the quality of life for our residents and helps in our goals to become a healthy, safe, and prosperous community.
I think there's also future plans. One is for a charter school to be developed out on the facilities. So I think in the long run, it also provides, again, it's not requiring any financial support from the county, just that we support the process. And again, the entity making the award is going to is going to score the grant application based on its merits. So again, we have a separate entity doing the review. We have a motion. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? The motion is to approve and authorize the appropriate administrative staff to write a letter of support for the grant application by the Monk Gardens Board. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. We will move on and go back to the agenda then as presented, and we will start with policy issue and potential committee determination, discussion on the committee input for the administrator in negotiating the digester, bonding, and guidance as to which committee should provide input. Put this on the agenda. Again, the board has approved the first phase of the bonding authorization. Again, it does not commit us, but as we had heard in the discussions, we might have the opportunity to negotiate in this contract, in the bonding, things that we might not be able to have if we are not part of the oversight. And so one example of that was the discussion that took place at ERC, the potential of requiring ground monitoring wells in monitoring potential affluent contaminant into the water system. And so that was just one of the things. So what I was looking from the executive committee was which committees do we want and provide to have discussions at the committee level to provide the direction for the administrator to start the negotiation process with the entity that is requesting the bonding itself. So do we want, for example, ERC, obviously, potentially to take up the discussion about what else do we want, if anything more than simply just monitoring wells in the negotiations? Is there something from economic development? Do we want X number of jobs and a guaranteed livable wage from the individuals that are going to be paid? And so that's what I'm looking for from this committee, is what committees do we want to provide input? Again, the administrator needs to start that negotiations. And then eventually, whatever negotiated contract is still got to come back to this full board for discussion. So that's where we're at. I open it up for discussion from the committee. Supervisor Langenhahn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 1 second. I think it's working. Test. Yep.
You got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. One, I really want us to move away from having 3 standing committees of jurisdiction on this issue, because I think that creates a lot of inefficiencies with communicating things to the board. I understand that each of those 3 committees, being ERC, EEDC, and HR Finance, all have a role to play in it, but I think that creates a lot of inefficiency. I was trying to brainstorm something, and the only thing I could think of is for one of the 3 committees to take a lead on it, such as HR Finance or any of the other 2 for that matter, and then possibly having a joint meeting between the 3 committees to have some discussions as far as what we want. So we'd have a joint meeting between the 3, communicate our expectations, and then HR Finance would take the lead from the negotiations from there. Those are my thoughts. I want to throw them out there for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Other discussion? Supervisor Robinson, please.
I would support that approach. I think that I think we've got we've got a time frame. I'm just not sure what that is. Where we have to do it in doing that joint meeting would probably expedite that process and make sure that one committee's not raising an issue that would bounce it back and forth between the meetings. So I think that makes sense. I think the concern, I had a chance to talk to the chair, is that we not lose this. We act on things and we move on to the next, and all of a sudden we wait until it's back on somebody else puts it on our plate. And I think we've got opportunities here if we're going to move ahead with county's role in this funding to shape some policy relative to the monitoring that takes place. And there's potential for job creation there. But we've also got to make sure we're covering our cost. So all of those committees have a role to play. So I think that makes sense.
To administrator, I pose a question to the administrator. Do we know the timeline that the entity is looking for, at least a final decision, with a negotiated agreement to move forward on the bonding issue?
The short answer is I don't at this time. That's a good question. I, in fact, reached out earlier today to get clarification from the attorney that presented to the full board relative to the project for which the initial resolution was approved. Again, that attorney is also representing an entity that is making a request for approval relative to Public Finance Authority financing, and I requested kind of a timeline with respect to action from the county on both of those projects. I have not heard back as of yet. As soon as I do, I will certainly reach out and convey that to the full board.
Supervisor Dickinson.
Supervisor Dickinson, please.
Thank you. So is that request that there would be three of our standing committees in one meeting?
That's the initial thought.
Correctly?
That's the initial thought.
So okay. And that was ERC, EEE, DC, and HR Finance?
Correct.
So that would put 20 board members in a meeting?
No,
that have
because
any
there are
issue?
several people on EEDC that also serve on
There's two.
ERC.
That's two. That's Mr. Seefelt and Ms. Unger.
Pardon
So
me?
if you have eight,
Yep, go ahead.
so you have 8, 7, and 7, that's 22 members. 2 are duplicated. That would leave 20 members. So I'm just asking the question, does that create an issue with any kind of quorum of the county board itself?
No, it doesn't. All we would do is issue a bad key notice, and a bad key notice basically states that any quorum of any of the other entities may exist, but the actions would be taken by each of the standing committees.
Thank you.
Supervisor Longhorn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two more thoughts. The first one is the only reason I suggest having a joint meeting of the three is to try and get all those ideas in one room, one time, get it done, communicate them to the administrator, and move on. I don't know if there's another way to do that so efficiently, because even if all three standing committees met at their regularly scheduled monthly meeting and we all had a discussion and said, well, what do we want out of this agreement? It still takes time for those three committees to meet and then time for us to send that information to the administrator. I'm saying if you have just one special meeting with all those people together, that might be an efficiency. I just don't know any other way. The other thing I was going to throw out there is that last year was it the gas rights? We had a meeting, thank you. We had a meeting with ERC, HR Finance, and also Solid Waste. Now, don't get me wrong, there are Solid Waste citizen members that wouldn't count towards our quorum of the county board. So I 100% respect Supervisor Dickinson's concerns with that. I guess what I'm trying to say is we have had large meetings in the past, committee meetings. So I think it could work, assuming all the chairs got along together, which, I think we're okay. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So any other discussion on this item? I think what I will do is I will leave it up to the three committees to work out a joint committee meeting scheduled in the very near future to be able to give direction to administration on the items that those committees feel are critical, at least in the negotiation phase. That's not to say that, it gives direction to administration on the negotiations. It's not to say that we are going to, receive all of what we request. However, it provides direction to administration. Vice Chair McCune, you had a comment?
No, I was just thinking I didn't know what the time frame was, but I was concerned about the number of supervisors in the 3 committees, and I know we've done something similar with that ordinance for that we had public safety and infrastructure involved in, where you could have a task force, but I don't know that this would warrant a task force as far as the time restrictions. But have 2 people from each committee, but still, I think you're duplicating it too. So I'm not sure what the time frame is.
I think the challenge with that would be that the charter would have to be created. The charter would have to be approved by the full board to create a task force. Supervisor Longenon, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And last thing I'll say, because I want to be clear, that idea of the joint committees meeting is only because I suspect we're under at least a little bit of a timeline to get that done. If we had 6 to 8 months to have some meaningful discussions, let's do a task force. I would much rather do that than have 20 people get in the room and have a discussion together. Thank you.
Okay. I think there's consensus that we move forward with having a joint meeting of EEEDC, HR Finance, and ERC, 3 committees, 3 committee chairs. I will leave that up to them to work on scheduling issue and scheduling that meeting. Supervisor Longenon, please.
Last thing. With the understanding that that's because we believe that we're on some sort of timeline going forward, I would just request that if the administrator discovers that we suddenly have, say, 4 to 6 months to have a discussion, we should meet again and actually iron out a task force to do that. Because I think that task force could sunset pretty quickly. Have those discussions and just move on. So
My understanding, at least from some of the communications I think that we had, they were looking for something committing the county one way or the other by the end of the first quarter of 2024.
okay. All right. Thank you.
And I don't believe that would lend itself to the ability to timely get that resolved and allow time for negotiations by the administrator. Administrator Leonard?
Yeah, I will just say that as soon as I get information from the attorney representing this endeavor, I will convey that to the full board and, again, await further direction from the board if the course of action is going to be something other than the 3 committee meeting that has been referenced here today.
Okay, I don't know that we need a motion by that. I think there's consensus by the executive committee that the 3 committee chairs will get together and come to an agreement on a future joint meeting. Okay, we'll move on then to item number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. A discussion and possible action by the executive committee, a review of the administrator's 2023 work plan, and discussion of the 2024 work plan items. In your packet is a updated administrator work plan with progress that was made on various items. I will make note that there's been some, even since the creation of that update, there's been some additional updates that I and the administrator had discussions on just yet today. So I will turn it over to the administrator to provide those additional updates and answer any questions on the work plan progress. Administrator Leonard, please.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. And I'll be brief. I just want to start by saying I appreciate the opportunity to deliver the update to you. Very pleased of the progress that we've made on the work plan items that the board has identified and we were able to accomplish on your behalf. Our team, I am very fortunate to work with the individuals that I do, and they have done an excellent job in moving a lot of these projects forward. With respect, and I'm not going to go through all the items, I just would highlight a couple of things that Chair Gibbs has indicated even after putting this in the packet for this meeting. We had a couple of developments even this week that I think are good to note. And the one of those updates is relative to the property divestment discussion that is in item 1G of the work plan, assisting HR Finance and Property in moving that forward. Starting with the meeting yesterday with HR Finance and Property, the idea that the committee came up with is to essentially utilize the property to the north of Stewart Avenue that has historically been associated with the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point Wausau campus as kind of a test case for utilization of a request for proposals process for redevelopment. So going to start working on that first. There's also another parking lot adjacent to the courthouse that will be part of that process. Starting today, I did reach out to some colleagues to see if we could have additional support in that. But I think that's the direction from HR Finance, and I think that makes logical sense. Also in that same vein, I had a conversation earlier today with the credit union director. We've been working with the credit union that currently operates out of our Thomas Street location, the former social services location, trying to help them as they work to find another location in which to operate. Had a good development today. They have a location that they believe would work well. They still need to do some discovery there, and as do I, relative to the ability of the county to assist them, because I think they are going to be looking for some assistance in that relative to a continued lease arrangement. But I'll report back more details. I just had a very brief conversation with that director today. And then also relative to divestment, I learned today that two of our properties that we own and have historically permitted North Central Healthcare to utilize for purposes of delivering community-based residential facility services, that North Central Healthcare has sublet those properties to a third party. The third party director of that third party, contacted me today and expressed that the arrangement with North Central is working exceedingly well and that they are interested in examining purchase of those properties. I don't have any details, but I am going to schedule a meeting to have a discussion relative to that interest, and I'll report back to the board. With respect to the work plan also, I just wanted to update on item 1B, the Lakeview campus renovation projects. We have had a number of other local government entities that have expressed considerable interest in utilizing that conference center space. We did provide a tour to the county board to a number of members, at your previous meeting. It's not surprising that individuals are interested, so we'll be developing some policies to guide that, and I'll bring that back to the board for your review and input. Relative to item 4C, HR policy review, just wanted to update you. HR Finance and Property, met again yesterday and provided some guidance relative to what they hope to accomplish in the remaining months of this term. And one of those items that we'll be working on, staff will be working on very diligently, is a comprehensive review of our HR policies over the next couple of months to really separate out those items that are really operational in nature and those items that are policy in nature, and bring a document to the HR Financing Property Committee, which under your rules is charged with reviewing those and updating them. And we'll hopefully be able to get an update done in that time frame consistent with the desires of the HR Finance and Property Committee. So those are the only updates kind of that since the posting of the packet that I wanted to provide. But happy to answer any questions or provide clarification relative to the 2023 work. And then also looking for any thoughts you may have on the 2024 work plan items. I did include in the 2023 work plan. You will recall that we had a number of items that were essentially not prioritized for action in 2023. I left those on the document. They're demarcated by a highlighted row in the document, and those items that are below that highlighted row were those items that were essentially not prioritized. That said, we did move forward a couple of those items, most notably the review of the 12.04 Assemblies Ordinance that Vice Chair McEwen referenced before, and utilizing a work group to do that. And we hope to bring proposed revisions that we've been able to put those in, get those drafted, proposed revisions in the near future to the county board for review.
With that, I'd open it up for questions on the presentation of the 2023 work plan. First, Supervisor Mass, please.
I was just wondering if you could just give a brief explanation how we're involved with Pinecrest Nursing Home.
Sure. So right now, my understanding, and I don't have detailed involvement on that, but the Pinecrest Nursing Home is operated by North Central Healthcare. They have the management agreement and operate the nursing home. Lincoln County has been considering divesting itself of that nursing home and has been working to do that. As of right now, we're continuing to operate under that direction. Whether Lincoln County ultimately moves forward with a sale is something that as soon as that is finalized, I'll communicate that, or Chair Gibbs will communicate that. We're both on the executive committee for North Central Healthcare, but North Central Healthcare's budget did envision and is built around the revenue associated with that, and the positions not being in the budget for 2024. I don't know if Chair Gibbs, if you have any additional clarification.
Yeah, I would say that, the way that NCHC built the budget, they built it with the recognition that, or the potential recognition that Pinecrest would have not been in part of its operations starting January 1 of 2024. Obviously, that's not the case at this point yet. Lincoln County has not. They still are in the negotiation phase, as I understand it, of the potential divestment. And what that means is that the potential is the financials may be better for NCHC, at least during the interim while we're still managing it. But yeah, when and if we have a definitive explanation and time frame as to when and if NCHC gets out of the management of Pinecrest, I will report that back as soon as I have definitive information. Any other discussions on the 2023 work plan?
Yes, Supervisor Dickinson.
Supervisor Dickinson, please.
Thank you. So last year we had a listing, we had a draft of each item, as opposed to just the tables presented to us, which made it easier to move through that. Are we expected to receive that before we have to vote on this?
I can certainly provide a list in a similar form relative to the things that I see on the 2024 annual work plan, and I'll certainly do that. Each of the items that were in that list are essentially the items that are in the first column on the document. I simply, in that summary document, didn't include the deliverables, key dates, dependencies, and progress. So yes, I'm happy to do that. If there are any items that supervisors would like to have me put on that summary list, that's kind of the second half of the 6A1 item. Certainly, I have some carryover items that I referenced before that are kind of at the tail end of this update. But if there are certain things that any of the supervisors want added for the full board to consider, I would certainly welcome that input.
Supervisor Robinson, go ahead.
Just a comment on that to follow up.
Go ahead.
So last year we got an explanation on each item. It was quite a lengthy explanation, but it was good information. So we're not quite getting that now, and we don't have a list. I find it a little bit difficult to vote on this without knowing what is specifically going to be done for this year and what is going to be future. Because last year we also had a future list, and then those items will be moved up. So, for consistency and to truly understand what the plan is, I really think that's what we need.
I appreciate the feedback. I apologize if I was inarticulate in my explanation. I'm not asking for any action relative to approving a 2024 work plan at this point. Just asking if there are items that you want included in that very list you referenced, Supervisor Dickinson. So I apologize for the inarticulate explanation of what I was seeking.
Yeah, at this point.
And I apologize for not
ahead.
understanding. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. At this point, the intent is to seek input on items to include in the list so that we at the next executive committee meeting can provide the prioritization of those items. We understand that in some cases, everything below the yellow or I'm not sure what color that is, orange, yellow, everything below that line, obviously was not prioritized. However, some of them were still worked on, and some of them did make some progress. And then there obviously will be carryover of any non-completed items, but we'll provide that list for the executive committee to look at at our February meeting. And then prioritize those in the February meeting, and then provide that work plan at some point to the full board. Other discussion on the 2023 plan, and then any input for the 2023 first. Supervisor Robinson?
I just wanted to pick up on the tax deed process. We've been making good progress, but I think we've stalled a little bit relative to getting some information from the treasurer's office. Some of that's associated with staff turnover, but I would hope that we would continue to move ahead. We have properties that after 10 years, we lose the ability to recover those costs. And I think it's in everybody's interest to try to expedite that process and move it along. And again, we changed the process to NREM. With a lot of help from administration and the Corporation Council and the treasurer, clerk, and others working on the processes, but we've got more work to do.
I think the other thing to note, I think where we're at in that process on the first batch anyway, we're very close to actually taking the next official action, which would be court action on the first batch of in-rem takings. Supervisor Langenau, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question about J. It's on table page 13, aid in the comprehensive review of Marathon County ordinances. So ERC, we're in the middle of updating farmland pres, but that's not an ordinance, but that's just our current main thing that we're reviewing right now. But after we're done with that and the new board is seated, we're pretty much going to go right into our comprehensive zoning revision, which we do every 10 years. So I guess I'm just curious for the administrator, when you say aid, is there direct management in that, or is that just something you consider in your progress on this item?
That's a good question. I'll just tell you kind of the impetus to this is that it has been my experience that when we take a good hard look at some of our ordinances, what we end up finding is that they would benefit from a comprehensive review, essentially starting at 1.01 and working our way through to examine whether things are updated. I'll go back to ordinance 12.04. We had discussions, and this is dating myself a little bit here, but it was back when I was the deputy county administrator, and we were trying to address an issue that was coming forward, and that was these large events and the events that required county support. And we didn't know we had an ordinance. And then when we looked at the ordinance we had, it referenced a committee that no longer existed. So that was kind of my point. And I think when Clerk Trueblood and I had talked about this as well, we looked into some ways to accomplish that. And our Muni Code consultant, the entity that essentially hosts all of our county ordinances online, put together a proposal for us to have one of their employees, I think a lawyer, help go through that process. My only concern with that I voiced at that time was that's really not providing input from the county board perspective or staff perspective. That's having a consultant just review your ordinances, which I don't see a whole lot of value in. I think you get a much better product when we're kind of reviewing it with our own eyes, for lack of a better term. I'm not saying that you have to do it. It's just a suggestion. Absent that comprehensive approach, I think the approach that you referenced is the one that we'll continue taking. That's the one that we have historically taken, that when we see the opportunity for a certain code area to be revised, we revise it. Just in this term, you've revised a number of your code areas or looked at revising them. I referenced 12.04. You also had a substantive review of your emergency management ordinances that you adopted. And of course, you had some zoning, some pretty substantial changes within the zoning ordinances. So I'm not saying that process doesn't work. It's just not starting at one end and working your way through. I do have a note in there. I'm not sure if everyone was aware, but we actually have a parking ordinance that the county board adopted that provides very detailed information about how parking should be handled at the Marathon County Courthouse and other facilities. My suggestion on that, as you can see in my note, is we should really make that a lot more summary in nature and simply really vest that authority in staff to, particularly as it relates to staff parking. That's really the issue with some of the changes we've made, hybrid work environments. It's my judgment that assigning parking spots based on seniority doesn't make perhaps the sense it did when we were a union, largely union county government.
I think the other thing that we found is several times that there would be a reference to another section in the ordinance, and that reference was either changed, outdated, or obsolete. And so I think, when we find those, obviously we can correct them at that time. But again, I think what we're looking here for is a more comprehensive A to Z, comprehensive review of our ordinances. Supervisor Longhorn, please.
Which I want to be clear, I'm more than supportive of that. In fact, I like how we currently are just going about, and when we find something, we take it to the appropriate committee of jurisdiction. The committee addresses it, goes to the county board moves on it, we move on. I like that. I don't see a huge need for a comprehensive review of everything from A to Z. Even at ERC this month, we were looking at Chapter 19. We're going to be looking at Chapter 17 in a couple months, the preliminary update before going to the comprehensive update next term. So, when you discover the inconsistencies, I'm sure that's an inefficiency, but, the board addresses it and moves on. So I was just curious what the involvement would be there and what the task was. So thank you.
Other discussion? Again, one of the things that we do the eval on when we do the evaluation on the administrator is an evaluation in accordance with completion and or the amount of completion in the work plan and the progress that was made. And we'll be forwarding to the full board their review and input for from last month. We provided the 4 questions that we wanted to ask the full board to provide their feedback on. We now have the work plan, and so we will be doing the eval on the administrator next month. I know our rules call for it to be in January, but I wanted to be able to have the update on the administrator's work plan before we did the eval. So anything else on the 2023 work plan? Okay, any other input, recommendations for the 2024 before we get the list from administration on items that are on the tentative work plan for next year? Okay, I still think we still have a fair number of large projects that are still on the current work plan there's still progress being made. The Forensic Science Center, we've made great progress on that, but we will be going into the building phase of that project, and also, the continued upgrade of the facilities at NCHC to downsize, obviously, and relocate several departments down on River Drive. That continues. So there's never a shortage of work for the work plan, and am very thankful that administration is able to, besides continued running of the operation of a 700-plus employee operation and the day-to-day operation, be able to make the progress that he has on the work plan that we had. Any other thoughts? Any other discussion? Okay. We will then move on. Okay, discussion and possible action of the executive committee to forward to the county board for its approval. This is another request that came to administration, and it's coming from a separate entity, not the entity that was discussed in item 5A, but this is another entity looking and seeking for approval for them to go out and do bonding for a digester through PFA. So they're not looking for the county to provide the bonding and conduit bonding. They're looking for approval for a project by PFA. I had a discussion a while ago with the Andy Phillips, who happens to be the Corp counsel for WCA and the PFA and the Public Finance Authority, and under the guidance that he set out was that the administrator is empowered to be able to provide that authority and grant the approval for that funding. I felt that it was important that we have direction to administration as to if it's Economic Development Committee or if there's, again, it's not looking for county funding, but it's looking for approval for a project that's going to take place in the county, but funded through PFA. And there is an approval process that is needed by the county to approve funding projects through PFA. So again, the county has to sign off on authorizing a application through PFA for a project that's going to take place in Marathon County. This happened back when PFA, at least in Marathon County it happened, historically. Back when PFA was first formed, Marathon County was one of the founding counties to to create PFA, Public Finance Authority. And if anybody, maybe there's only 2 or maybe 3 members on the exec committee that remember back when Foremost Farms had a project that PFA funded, and the county board approved that. But again, so what we're looking for here is what direction do we want to provide administration as far as when requests come in to grant Public Finance Authority the approval to go through the process of looking at a grant or a loan application, bond application for a project that's going to happen in Marathon County. Because again, according to Mr. Phillips, Attorney Phillips, and that was that the administrator has the authority, but I felt it was important that the board provide direction, or at least the executive committee provide direction to the administration saying, you know what, if it's a operation that's going to have economic development opportunities in Marathon County, just approve it? Or do we want it to go to the EDC committee for their review and give authority to the administrator to approve those contracts, those potential bonding issues? So Supervisor Langenbaum, please.
The thing was, Chair, you had mentioned that the county board had approved the Foremost project, but Attorney Phillips is saying that our administrator would have the authority to approve the potential project that we have sitting in front of us. So was authority delegated to the administrator in order to approve those in the meantime, since the county board approved that first project?
The county board I've understood Attorney Phillips to say that it's provided in statute that he has the authority to approve it. But I felt it was important because historically, at least the one project went to the full board for approval. My concern was, let's be consistent. If we want just a committee approval, at least a cursory review of the project and approval of the project, and the bonding, application at least, and that's really what it amounts to. It doesn't mean that PFA is going to bond the project. It means that there's going to be approval by Marathon County to go ahead with the bonding application to Public Finance Authority. Other questions?
Supervisor Dickinson.
Supervisor Seefeld first, and then Supervisor Dickinson next.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we want this to go through EED, I would, appreciate working with it, the committee, and but it would be up to the executive committee to see if we want to work with it, or do we want the administrator just to approve it? I think it should go through a committee. It would make it a little bit more sense to it, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Other Supervisor Dickinson next, please.
Thank you. I would agree with Supervisor Seefeld that it should go to his committee. And then I guess I would say after that, it should come to the full board. Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Langenhan.
Hey, Mr. Chair, I'm perfectly fine with that roadmap. The only thing I will say is then let's have an internal policy document that stresses that this is how we're going to handle these requests, because otherwise, if we're going off of just what's in statute, then why is the county board doing it this way? So I think that would be appropriate for EEDC to have a discussion with, just have a policy in place. That way we're backed up by it. So thank you.
Supervisor Robinson, please.
In light of that comment, I would just ask Corp Counsel to review 151, where we've got policies, and there is a policy in there relative to conduit bonding. Maybe that can be amended to reflect this discussion.
I think the other thing, what I would say is we need to develop the criteria by which that committee is going to review those projects. Is there an economic development component? Is there an employment component? What is the criteria by which the committee makes the determination to approve the project or not approve the project? It's not just, I don't like this project. There's got to be, I think we need to develop that criteria so that the EEDC committee has the criteria to review the project. Yep, these are the check boxes that we need to check that the project does meet these criteria, and then move them forward so that we are consistent when we review projects that come through on that request. So if there's, if there's thought by the executive committee, I think there should be an economic development component. There should be potentially, if there is an employment component, one of our goals in our strategic plan was that the jobs that are created are family wage supporting jobs. So is that another one of the criteria items? Or in some cases, we may not know. But again, what is the criteria? I say there has to be an economic development component, and if there is an employment component, that the employment be family wage qualified. Other thoughts? Supervisor Robinson?
Just, I'm going to just quickly read the current conduit financing. I think that may shed some light. Conduit financing is debt issued. Well, this would be, it's the current one by Marathon County to finance a project of a non-county third party. The county may sponsor conduit borrowing for these activities, economic and industrial development, health facilities, the arts, et cetera, that have a general purpose and are consistent with the county's overall goals. Unless a compelling public policy rationale exists, such conduit financing will not in any way pledge the county's full faith and credit. The county, prior to the approval of such financing, may review information related to the financial feasibility of the project and financial capacity of that entity. Now, we've used that for the bug tussle, but I think we could probably, if we put in some language relative to the strategic plan and other things, probably get at that criteria.
Thank you. Absolutely. Other discussion? Okay, so I think the direction is that we direct that to those requests as they come in that are going to be direct requests for PFA funding to go to ERC, and then we utilize the conduit bonding description to determine the requirements. Supervisor Longeman, please.
So two things. I think first, you meant EEDC and not ERC.
Excuse me, EEDC, sorry.
The second thing is, would this require a motion?
It doesn't hurt.
Okay. Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to refer the request to Education Extension Economic Development. Yeah.
All right. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Seefeld. Any further discussion? Do we have enough guidance? Vice Chairman Sheehan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I agree with the motion in a second. Is this going to be changed as far as, because we do have rules coming up, is this something that we should change? I don't know if Supervisor Robinson was referring to having it changed in our rules or ordinances.
I don't believe there'll be a change in the rules. There might be a change in the ordinance as we develop that ordinance. Administrator Leonard, please.
This is just my perspective, so feel free to disagree, and Dan, do the same. I think based on my sense is that it may be helpful if Corp Counsel and I work to offer some potential language for the board to consider relative to amending section 1.51 sub 7, the conduit financing section, to kind of get at the idea that conduit financing, where the debt is issued by Marathon County, which is the situations that were alluded to, the bug tussle situation, or the initial resolution relative to a digester that you recently took up, but also have perhaps language that gets at approvals for the Public Finance Authority, which are certainly they're financing being provided, but it's not pledging the credit of Marathon County. So we can perhaps take a crack at bringing some language back for you in light of, provided the motion passes, it would have that language about those requests going to the Extension, Education, Economic Development Committee for initial consideration, and then the full board.
That's very logical. Any other discussion? So the motion is to approve and forward to the Triple EDC committee any requests that are requesting funding through PFA directly only. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed, say no. Motion is carried and is unanimous. Thank you. Again, educational presentations and committee discussion, none. Next meeting, committee members are asked to bring items for ideas for the future meeting, future discussion. Again, next month we will have the administrators review. We'll be going potentially into closed session. We'll be taking input from the full board on the administrators eval, as with the executive committee's eval. With that, we are down to item 8B. Next meeting is February 8th. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Langenhan. Is there a second? Second by Vice Chair McEwen to adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.